But welcome. Thank you so much for joining us. You're welcome to join us on camera if you'd like, or off camera if you need. Um, Please, I would ask that everyone just mute themselves for now. We're going to leave time for questions at a couple points during the presentation. My name is Bree Rose Gallick. I'm a senior manager at CDFI Friendly America. I've been with them now for about 3.5 years. And I'm joined by our president and founder, Mark Pinsky, and Lance Lathan, who's a senior consultant for us and is also the owner of Tract Advisors. Lance was the main developer of this map. So today, obviously, we're going to be talking about the CDFI Advocacy Map. And Lance, thank you. And Mark will give us a little bit of context about why the map was created, why we're releasing it now, why it's important in this current political climate. Lance will give us a demonstration of the map, how to use it, answer any technical questions you might have about the data or how to use some of the different layers. And then we'll talk about some of the custom products that we're going to be offering, so custom data sheets and maps. We will send out this slide deck later today. So if you have to jump off early or if you have a colleague who wasn't able to attend, you can share it with them. And I think that's it. I'm going to hand it over to Mark for some context. Thanks.
Thank you, Bree. Thanks, everybody, for joining us. As many of you who know me know, I came into the CDFI world through policy 35 years ago, before there was much policy to work on, and now there's a lot of policy to work on. And we're facing headwinds in all things CDFIs, not just in things specifically CDFIs, like we've never really faced before. There are a few moments that have been challenging, but I think the turbulence now is like none other. We all know that we're all focused on the CDFI fund, obviously, and my belief is, although I don't know this, is that it will survive through whatever cuts come out of the budget framework that the House approved last night, and that it will continue, but it may be pared back, and so we're all concerned about that. We obviously want to make a case for that. Greenhouse gas reduction fund, you're probably aware, is under it's getting battered in media and social media, but people are fighting back, and that's important. Community Reinvestment Act, just to be really clear, the 2024 proposed revisions, the ones that would have expanded market for CDFI for banks lending outside of their footprint, that the proposed revisions are dead on arrival. They're not going anywhere. They're going to get withdrawn in the next month or two. And there is talk that there may be an effort to get rid of the Community Reinvestment Act altogether, get rid of the 1977 law that created the Community Reinvestment Act. I hope not, and I hope that our colleagues who are advocating on behalf of that will win that one. There are going to be, we know, significant cuts at HUD. We know there are going to be significant cuts at USDA. We think there'll be cuts at Commerce. There may be changes at SBA. There are probably others, and if we just wanted to devote the call to talking about what people are focused on, we could easily spend our time doing that, but that's not what we're here for. So with all of this in mind, we really wanted to make the most of our advocacy. We know that the industry and its allies will work hard to defend the industry and to make our case and to tell our story. And we think that there's some data that can really help do that. So that's really what led us to drive to create the CDFI Advocacy Map. And we'll walk you through it in a second. We want to make it as easy as possible for anyone who wants to advocate for CDFIs to show the value of the CDFIs and all that we're doing. And we can talk a little bit later if we want to about how to do that. And we also think that the transaction level reporting that many CDFIs do can be a really powerful tool used properly. So we'll get to that as well. We also think that a good map will really not only will it make a case to policymakers and to their staff, but it's a new way of engaging them. And we'll see that as we get into the map and we look as we go down through the levels, and we realize that there's a lot more to talk about than just the simple dollars of CDFI lending. And most of all, I really want to say we're trying to add to what I think is already a rich supply of advocacy tools. CDFI Coalition, I know, just updated its advocacy tools, and I encourage you to use them. OFN, Inclusive, the Community Development Bankers Association, and others are doing that. And of course, individual CDFIs have gotten very good at at telling their own story. And so we hope that our tools can be used in conjunction with some or all of those, depending on what you need. The map we're about to show you, and you may have looked at because it's been online for a few days already. There's unlimited free use. We want you to use this. The whole goal of this is to use this, and we try to make it as easy as we can for you to select and compile your own data that's relevant to your CDFI or whatever case you're making. We think you can use it in real time in advocacy. So when I think back to the time sitting in a congressional office, you can pull this up on your phone and use it and pop up a pop-up with all the statistics for congressional district in real time. And to the extent the numbers change for any reason, we'll update them in a real-time basis. It's currently set up only to work with federal congressional places, i.e. congressional districts or states, so Senate, Senate seats. But we are working on and will soon introduce state legislative places as well. So state House, state Senate, jurisdictions as well. So for folks who are working at the state level, and I would just suggest that with all that's going on at the federal level, there's going to be a ripple of new activity at the state level, as well as particularly, or perhaps at the local level. Bree Rose made a mention that we do have optional customized reports. We've tried to make this so you don't need them, but if they're useful to you or if they're cost effective for you, we want you to be able to use them. And we'll talk more about them. We can provide sort of a one-page data sheet for any number of places you might want, any number of congressional districts or states or anything like that. And for those of you who are interested in including your transaction level reporting data on a map, we can customize a map just for you that you can use as you see fit, including the option of putting that map with just your lending, perhaps against the national lending, put your lending on your website. So we want to be able to do that. And to the extent that there are coalitions who want to represent all the lending that their CDFIs have done, we want to be able to support that as well. So a few facts. This one, no surprise, but it was good to look at the map, look at the data that we collected and analyze it by congressional districts. But 100% of congressional districts, and so obviously 100% of the U.S. states in the District of Columbia have received CDFI financing since 2005. So we're not missing anybody. That's good. And even the district with the lowest total still received more than $26 million in CDFI financing. It's an important number to know because $26 million is by it's not nothing. It's a significant amount of money. And the top levels are much higher than that. Another sort of top line fact for you to know that 4 out of 5 congressional districts are served regularly by CDFIs. And CDFIs are therefore well positioned to do more in them. They're already working there. What we mean by regularly is that there are not CDFI deserts, or what we prefer to call CDFI opportunity markets. So 87 congressional districts, or 20% of the congressional districts, are CDFI deserts where we can do more, and where CDFI Friendly America was created to try to help CDFIs do more. Again, important to know how much of Congress is well covered by CDFIs. We wanted to look, sort of drilling down a little bit, we looked at House and Senate leadership, and both House Speaker Mike Johnson and House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries have seen CDFI lending in their districts that's about above the national average per capita. We look at data, that's a key data point for us. We look at per capita data because it normalizes it across rural and urban places. And you can look at the numbers there. And both Senate Majority Leader John Thune and Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer had statewide levels below average, just slightly below for Senator Schumer, but more significantly for Senator Thune, whose state includes a fair number of native areas, reservations. And this one, I was surprised by this. 2/3 of CDFI financing since 2005 has gone to states that voted for Republican Donald Trump in 2024. 35% went to states that voted for Kamala Harris. It's actually a useful fact in advocacy, and I think people will be interested in it, but it was just was an example of the kind of things we could learn from the kind of analysis that we did, so that you have whatever talking points you need and you can do whatever analyses you need. So that's just some points. I do want to say, I'm about to hand it over to Lance. He's going to bring up the map, the advocacy map. Please put questions if you have them in the chat. We may not be able to answer them all while we're working on this, and there will be time at the end for lots of conversation and questions and suggestions, because we're absolutely looking for ways to make this work better for you and for CDFIs. So Lance, you're up.
Great, thank you, Mark. All right, thanks everyone. Happy to have you all here. So I want to go through the actual mapping tool itself. I'm going to focus on some of the data sources, as well as how those data sources play out in the map. And then I also want to kind of walk through a couple of use case scenarios that might be useful as you try to think about how you could use this for your own organization and for your advocacy at both congressional districts and state senate levels. So the main page, as you can see, has the mapping tool as you scroll down a little bit. We do have a detailed instructions section. I'm not going to expand that now because I'm going to kind of go through all that, but certainly there for your use as you explore the map on your own. The default setting is to show the nationwide characteristics, and at the state level, we're looking at the CDFI lending per capita as a percentage of the national average. And so, as you noticed, I just expanded the menu and clicked the legend option. This little section here is how you're going to navigate throughout the map. It's also how you're going to draw and undraw certain layers. But I started off with just showing the legend, so you get a sense of what's being shown right now. If I go one zoom in, so just using the scroll wheel or however you want to use your zoom effect, it's pretty similar to any other mapping tool you've used, like Google Maps. It will all of a sudden start to show certified CDFI locations, the congressional district boundaries, as well as the state data. Really quickly, before I kind of move in and go to the congressional district level, I want to focus on how we present the CDFI lending data. Mark touched on how we like to look at per capita lending as a way to normalize by population. If we always show total lending, California and Texas are always going to blow Rhode Island and Delaware out of the water for obvious reasons. But when we normalize by population, we get that relative sense of CDFI activity. And in terms of how we're presenting it here, in terms of high, moderate, low, very low, extremely low, this is similar to how we look at area median income. So you're all familiar with the CDFI fund, of course, looks at median family income as a percentage of the AMI. This is looking at essentially CDFI lending per capita as a percentage of the national CDFI lending per capita. So again, just benchmarking against that baseline at the national level. And as we zoom in, so I'm going to put the legend out really quick. I'm actually going to, oops, sorry about that. I'm going to look at South Carolina. I was exploring around, and South Carolina has some interesting juxtaposition in terms of congressional districts. And so we're still looking at the state data in terms of the CDFI lending as percent of the national per capita, but we're starting to see the congressional district boundaries, and specifically we're seeing congressional district boundaries where at least 50% of the census tracts are investment area tracts, so they're economically distressed based on poverty, income, or unemployment. And then it's at this point where I think it's helpful to pull up the layer icon, which is this one here. This is where you can start to, okay, let's say as we get zoomed in, instead of looking at the state level, we can see the state level here pretty easily. We want to then look at congressional, congressional district levels. So that's going to show by district, how does that lending look, right? So we've gone from state to district, and we can see where relative CDFI lending is high, moderate, low, et cetera. And the reason I wanted to go into South Carolina is the unique constellation here where you've got congressional districts that touch each of these bands or each of these ranges. And so that's a case where, and if we drill in a little more, that's a case where if you're talking to representatives from South Carolina, you start to see that it varies, right? You've got some districts with a lot of CDFI lending, some not as much. And you'll notice as I zoomed in a little further, we start to see census tract level amounts of CDFI lending. So this is actually not per capita. This is actually total lending. And it gives you scaled by these rings, right? So the more lending that's occurring in each tract, the larger the ring. And so then you start to see within the districts, okay, where is the activity occurring even within the district? Where is it concentrated? So again, these varying districts with varying levels of relative CDFI lending, and then getting a specific sense of where in the district it's occurring. There are other layers. Also, actually, one thing I want to mention, you can select whatever base map you like. So you're free to use, say, like a street base map, which is going to give you a little more of a highway layout or kind of, the city. It's just giving you that context of specific places as you go in. So if we get a little closer to Columbia, for example, we can see some of the surrounding areas and the relative geography in terms of infrastructure and whatnot. But like I said, there are many other base maps you can select from, totally up to you. And in addition to having the relative CDFI lending at the congressional district level, we also have a tract level layer that we can draw. And actually, I'm going to undraw the rings because it gets a little redundant. But so now you can see census tract level CDFI lending per capita as a percentage of national average. So then it still has the congressional district boundaries out here, but you're starting to see it's starting to look a little more, all the geographies kind of blend into each other with the tract level data. And then the other one I wanted to mention, so the states, we also have the just the regular district boundary file. So at some point, it might be helpful just to take a step back and say you just want to see the state, the congressional district boundaries. You can do that too. You can take away the data layers and just look at more of the mapping utility and some of the basic layers. And then, like I said, you can add or remove any of the layers that I've already gone through. It's a pretty, once you get a feel for the layers and the layout, it's a pretty intuitive system to use. So I would certainly encourage you to explore the map and get a feel for it. I think I'm pretty good. Be good to
Lance, can you
time for questions. Yeah.
you show the pop-ups?
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, of course. Yes. So yeah, you can click on any geography and you can get a quick readout on the congressional district data. Thanks, Mark. Totally forgot about that. So at any geography, congressional district, state, tract, you'll be able to click here, click on the geography, and it's going to bring up, in this case, it's going to bring up congressional district data, and it's going to pull up whatever layers you have drawn. And in many instances, you're going to have multiple layers that match your click, right? So your click might be within more than one layer. And in that case, you can click. Now, in this case, it's there are two different congressional district layers drawn, so you're going to see the same one. But in the case of let's draw the census tracts again. And let's zoom down in here. We'll click on a census tract and you'll see, so it starts with congressional district, but then as we toggle over into the second screen, then you see the tract characteristics. So some of the basic population characteristics, total CDFI lending per capita, the percent of the national average, which is what's driving the layer, the mapping layer, and whether or not it's an investment area, poverty rate, et cetera. So again, as you explore around, absolutely, you can click on any of these geographies, see some of the background data, in which cases Mark mentioned earlier, you could copy and paste these, kind of make your own tables or any way you want to visualize the information as part of your advocacy work. That's all available for sure.
Lance, we have a question in the chat from Todd. It says, are the zip codes from targeted census tracts able to be extracted?
You mean like the FIPS codes? I think they mean not zip codes, but the like the tract ID codes. Yeah, absolutely. So I believe, sorry, so that's the congressional district. Let's go. So this is the full tract GeoID, the full FIPS code. So that if you're familiar with that, not to get too wonky, but the first two digits of the state, the next three are the county, and then the last six are the census tract codes. So that is the actual census tract GeoID, as we call it in GIS world, that you can identify the tract with. I'm pretty sure that's what they meant, because zip codes and tracts they don't line up. So I think that's maybe what the question was going for.
And just to answer Amy's question in the chat, she asks about if we could change the year range. Currently for this map, we're looking at from 2005 till 2022. It is possible for us to make maps looking at just the more recent years to see, how things have maybe changed over time. But we're trying to get sort of a historical view, over the past 18 years or so, what the CDFI lending has looked like. So not yet.
Yep.
Any other questions for Lance?
There's a question about, does it show what type of loan it is? And the answer is, Lance, no, not in this view.
Well, this isn't loan level data. This is aggregated to the census tract level. So no, it's all CDFI lending summed up at the tract level.
And yeah, and as we'll talk about later, we can work with individual CDFIs if they want to be able to look at their own lending, where we can have, specific address, specific XY address locations. Then we can look at it a little bit differently. But we're trying at this point, and we're looking for feedback. So keep the comments coming. We're trying to figure out what's the simplest way we can use this. Some of you have more experience than others in using maps. We'd love to talk to you about it, but the idea here is, if you're walking into a congressional office, or you're going to be walking into a congressional office, and you want to do some basic analysis, you can do it. As we say, we can help you do additional mapping and additional data. There are some other questions here, Bria, I'm trying to get to.
Looks like a sort of a question, maybe comment about opportunity zones. So that's certainly a layer we could add to this map. That wouldn't be a problem at all.
We haven't added it yet, again, just out of simplicity, but given the fact that the Trump administration seems to like opportunity zones and introduced them how many years ago? That was 6-7 years ago. That's certainly an option we can look at. We also don't include in here, for example, Justice 40 areas for greenhouse gas reduction fund consideration. That's in our other map, the CDFI market map, which we'll talk about in a minute. But yeah, so again, we're trying to find the right balance here. Julie Sky asks, who's making this lending happen? Julie, this is the lending that is reported by CDFIs to the CDFI fund for the years 2005, when they started reporting these data, as I understand it, to 2022, which is the most recent year. We'll obviously update them when we have 2023 data.
Well,
Yeah.
Mark, I was really looking at who the humans are that are making this happen. Obviously, some are very successful. So how do we see who are the people that are at the forefront of this? And how do we, for the areas that are not having that experience, how do we create that relationship in the area that's underfinanced?
Julie, I agree with you that that's important. This map is meant for those people who are doing the lending to talk to their representatives about this. So it's not that we don't think that's important. That's another aspect we think about. But it is, again, we're trying to find the right use for folks going forward. So thanks for raising that.
And it sort of kicks off the conversation about the custom products. We would love if we could see each CDFI's deal identified by the CDFI. And that's something that CDFIs can now order from us, a custom map using their TLR data specifically.
And Lance, the question is, can we export data into CSV? I don't think we're set up to do that at this point.
I answered that question earlier in the chat. I can copy the answer.
Yeah. Okay. I didn't see that. Sorry. We can run data for you on as many places as you want, or you can manually do it. It's all there. So we just we'll do it for you if you don't want to do it.
And Lance, before we leave this page, do you want to just quickly show us where they can order a custom data sheet or report or map that Mark's going to talk about?
Sure. So on the CDFI Friendly website, under maps, you hover over that, there's a custom map and report services page, which is this page here. And it has options for custom data sheets or custom mapping tools. And you can see a sample report. And is the request, so the request form is down towards the bottom. You can fill that out and submit it, and we'll get back to you as soon as we can.
Are there any more questions for Lance as we're just sort of looking at the map itself? Anybody need us to go back to the map? Great.
All right.
I'm going to bring back up presentation, I hope. So I want to, because some of the questions that came up sort of touched on this, I want to explain generally, we're trying to figure out different ways of providing as much data in as usable form as we can for as many CDFIs and their allies as we can. So this advocacy map, as we said, is organized by congressional districts and states, and we will soon add state legislative places, because we've already heard from a number of folks that that's something that they'd like to be able to work on, and I think it's going to be incredibly important. I mentioned in a comment earlier, we had some months ago, we had created the CDFI market map, and that was an effort to look at where CDFIs are lending and not lending. Our initial interest was in finding out where there are places they aren't lending, the CDFI deserts or CDFI opportunity markets. And that's fundamental to our business of trying to figure out how do we get more CDFIs working in those places, and how do we make it easy for them to do that. And to that map, we will be adding a little bit later this year what we call CDFI Opportunity Market Index, which is the potential for CDFIs to be successful lending in particular markets based on a quantitative analysis that we've developed with some others. But what we can blend these things, and some of the questions people ask suggest that, but we will do it as low a cost as we can, customized data reports and mapping that you might want to use for advocacy. So there are some folks who might see uses for this for advocacy, and we think there are lots of them. But you can also use them for your own internal uses or for public uses, as we'll discuss. They're useful. They can be useful for your own strategy and your own decision making, and they certainly can be useful for marketing. So let's see if we can go on. So what we're asking for you, we thank you for being here and for sharing your ideas, and we hope we'll hear a lot more. We want you to use the map and play with the map, explore the map. We know that we have different skill levels on this call, and that there'll be different skill levels. So we want to make it work for everybody. One of the things, adding layers can make it more complex. And if you're not familiar with maps, it can make it frustrating. But please send us feedback or suggestions or requests if you have them at info@cdfifriendlyamerica.com. And we're basically offering, as Lance just showed you, right now we're offering two products, data reports that start at $200 for a single place. So if you wanted all the data, you can go get it yourself. It's all there. So we're not, we add a couple of other columns from our other map, but I guess I can show you that if I'm doing my job right here. And is that too small? There we go. So this shows you the data. This happens to be the congressional leadership data that I talked about earlier. And we add on the right the two columns that we look at: population of color and what percentage of the set of the tracks are opportunity market tracks or desert tracks. So that's looking at the track level. So let's see. Let me go back to here. That you can see that on the order form, and we're still figuring out ourselves exactly how to do this. We've tried to price it fairly for folks, particularly who want multiple places. And then for those, we know that there's growing interest in people in being able to map their transaction level reporting data in various ways. And there are lots of ways it can be represented. It can include, for example, all the national data with an individual CDFI's data popping out, so that a CDFI can show on its website, as we suggest. We can show the its actual lending, and anybody who comes to its website can see where it's working. And it can show it, as we talked about earlier, it can show it either at the exact address level or the block level, or it can show it just at the census tract aggregation level. There are some privacy considerations that people think about and should think about in presenting that data. We're going to see how this works, and for the rest of for about a month now, we're going to see if people are interested in ordering things, and we'll review pricing then, depending on if it's the amount of work we think it is or more or less. We can adjust pricing. And for coalitions, I mentioned, I think we've talked with some coalitions about their interest in working across all their CDFIs, and we're happy to try and work on that and try and figure out prices that are fair and achievable for everybody. So time for more. If there are more questions about the product as we think of that, about the use of the map, this would be a great time for people to ask or to write to us and follow up otherwise. We'd love to hear from you.
Any more questions? Feel free to unmute yourself to ask.
I'm just looking in the chat. Yeah, we can talk, Chris, we can talk, if no one else has questions, we can talk about what the politics are as far as we can tell right now. I'm just trying to look at the other questions. Are there any other questions, Bree, that came up? Or Lance?
Not that I saw. I answered one in the chat about the custom maps, but
Okay, great.
I think that was the only other one.
Great.
I'm sorry if you already said that. Can I just ask it? I don't want to write anymore. I'm sorry if you already answered this, but can you export data from that map? Did you say if you can do that?
It doesn't.
Cannot
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
Yeah, you cannot export directly like a CSV file or anything. You can click on any geography, so census tract, a congressional district or a state, to pull up that pop-up window, and you can, copy that data, pop it in your own spreadsheet, or you can order a report from us, like the sample Mark showed. That does include other data points that are not included on the map, so you get a little bonus there. But yeah, you can't directly export. Thanks.
Oh, thank you so much. Thanks.
I'm inclined to say that the idea is that if you have to do it manually, that it's a good intern job. But I would imagine most interns would be much better at figuring out how to export data than certainly I would. So so I'm not sure that's a fair term. So are there any other questions about the map or map products? Anything anybody needs to know? When you get the slide deck, you'll have all of our email addresses if you don't already. So please be in touch with any of us or all of us if you'd like. I will turn to the political question, which is, do we know, let's see, one more question here. Yeah, well, so we're trying to decide that. We've done, as you saw earlier, Anthony, we did some top level congressional data. I think we'll do some summary data that we'll share with everybody just to contextualize what you might present. We don't have it yet, but it's easy to put together from our perspective, and we'll do that. We also we have used other maps to do other kinds of sort of reports. So if you were to go to our website and look in our resources, there's a map that looks at the correlation between qualified investment areas and race. It's a paper, and we wrote a paper called Race, Place, and CDFI Lending that we anticipated, and I think we're right, is going to be really important because we need to be able to talk about the folks we're trying to benefit and why we're trying to work for them. And it's harder now than it used to be to talk openly about the correlation between race and economic discrepancies or injustices. So that paper may be of interest to some of you as well.
And Mark, I just wanted to go back to a question that you actually answered in the chat, but someone asked, sorry, I don't have the name in front of me, but why are we looking at this map by congressional districts and states? And so this map specifically was created for advocacy for, CDFI practitioners or CDFI supporters to go to their congresspeople and show them, this is what's happening in your district. And can we increase this? Is it looking good? And the CDFI market map, as Mark mentioned, looks at it on a census tract level or county, city, metro area. So you can always take a look at that if you're more interested in those geographies.
And the truth of the matter is, we know there are a lot more types of analyses we could do or types of mapping we could do, but we were worried about making it more complicated at a time when we think I think certainly it's vitally important that we focus on advocacy. And so I'm trying to really stay focused on the task that is very much at hand for us right now. So, and with that, I'm gonna sort of move into the question that people asked earlier. We don't know exactly what's going to happen with the CDFI fund, with the House budget plan that was approved last night. There is guidance to House committees, to congressional committees, but in this case, it's only the House of Representatives, about how much they're supposed to cut and what they're supposed to cut from. We know that the cuts are actually really far-ranging and could have a lot of impact, but we don't know the details right now. We do know that as a result of a conversation held in public, that Senator Mark Warner, who is chair of the Community Development Finance Caucus in the U.S. Senate, has had conversations with the new Treasury Secretary, Scott Bessent, in which the Secretary spoke very positively about CDFIs and upbeat about CDFIs. My political read of that is that there's an agreement that they'll protect the CDFI fund, but that depends on the decision being made at the Treasury Department and not at next door at the White House or wherever the Department of Governmental Efficiency or whatever it's called is made. So it depends on who's making that call ultimately about whether the CDFI fund gets cut or dinged or trimmed. My expectation is that it'll get less money than it has in the past, and the amount of money it gets is not nearly enough for the industry and the scale it's at, in my view. And that some of the problems that are just have to do with capacity to process things, i.e. the certification process, I think is going to get further delayed. I think it's already delayed, and I think it's going to get further delayed. So, I'm concerned about that. And as someone who's been around the CDFI fund from its earliest days, I think it's incredibly important that the CDFI fund continue to operate and continue to make awards and continue to play a certification role and all the other things. Hopefully that means that new markets continues. Hopefully that means the capital magnet continues. Hopefully that means that the bond program continues. Hopefully that means that other things continue. And at the same time, because of the cuts that are going to be coming down from the federal government, and we know that some of them, particularly at HUD, most significantly, I mentioned USDA, Commerce, some of the other departments, they're going to change the math that local, state and local officials are going to be using to figure out what to do. And I think that as has happened in the Great Recession and the housing crisis, happened again during COVID, a lot of folks are going to turn to CDFIs and ask for help. And so it's going to be challenging because I think CDFIs are going to be asked to do more, and it's not clear that the resources are going to be all that we need them to be in order to be able to do that. So, and I don't think CDFIs are alone in this. I'm just particularly focused on CDFIs. So,
Chris, do you have a follow-up to that? I saw you come off of mute.
Yeah, thank you. I just dropped it in the chat, but I'll just read it. Mark, great to hear your perspective on all this. On the CDFI fund capacity front, is that linked to the contract reviewers? And I'm curious what the current state of that is. I've heard some rumors, but wanted to see if there was anything definitive that.
Yeah, there were. I don't know for sure. There were reports that all the CDFI fund had been told to discharge all of its contract reviewers. I've also heard that was raised but not followed through on. So I don't know that that's complete and done with at this point. But I think the fact that it was not just summarily, they were not summarily instructed to do that, so it probably reflects a little bit the fact that the CDFI fund is has some support.
Yes.
Administration. So, but even with that, so Amy's telling us it's continued uninterrupted, and they're continuing to work. I just don't think we've heard. Amy, I hope you're right. And I don't know that we've heard the final word, but I'm gonna go on your words, Amy, for as long as I have them. I think we haven't seen the real. I think we're not in the first tier of things that might get cut. I think if cuts come, they'll come later. So that's what we don't know. And Cynthia says, "Will the Zoom call get shared with the attendees? I lost audio once." Bree, what's our plan?
Yeah, we'll send the recording and the slides out later this afternoon with everyone who registered. So even if you had colleagues who weren't able to attend, but they registered, they'll get it.
Great. Yeah, I saw Jason's post on CDFI Connect. I've also heard other things at the same time. Jason's pretty plugged in, so I hope that's right. And Amy, I hope you're right. And we'll continue monitoring this. And, sharing information is vitally, vitally important when we're facing the challenges we're facing today. I think CDFI Connect's a great way to share information. It's how we like to do it. But please be in touch with us at any time if you have questions about the map, about advocacy, and or if you can't reach the person you need to reach right now at OFN or at the CDFI Coalition. And I will mention that the CDFI Institute, there we go, John put that up. Yeah, the CDFI Coalition Institute's coming up in a few weeks. And what I hope you'll do is share this, John, and anybody else who's going to be there, share what this is, because we're trying to reach out as broadly as we can. Again, this isn't for everybody. Not everybody needs to use it. A lot of people have their own resources. But if this is useful for, half a dozen folks, that's important. That's the legislation, working on the advocacy at this level. Every single visit you make makes a difference. So the better informed you are, the better your advocacy will be. So thank you for being willing to do that, John, and everybody else who's active in that. So do we have any other questions? Go ahead.
Yeah, I'm not seeing anything else. So if no one has any final questions, I think we can wrap it up.
Great.
All
Thank
right.
you, everybody. You know where to find us.
Yeah. Thank you, Lance.
Thanks,
Thank you,
everyone.
Mark.
Thanks,
Feel
Lance.
free to reach out to
Thank
us with any questions or feedback